everyone. So for my top 10 Tuesday, I thought I'd talk about some book to movie changes that I thought were either interesting or that I thought was just plain stupid to be changed or whatever. So keep in mind that I don't really hate these movies. Some of them are really good adaptations. I just felt that some things should not have been left out because it explained a lot more. It also kind of sometimes took away from the true feeling and heart of the story. But again, that a lot of these adaptations are still really good. I still enjoy them, or at least like them. I just felt that some of the stuff should have been left in there, or at least talked about a little bit. I have resisted the temptation to make this whole list solely based off the Hunger Games, which I could have done for all three movies, but it will come up more than once, so be warned. So for the first one, I have the difference between the ring, or Ringu, or I think it's pronounced Ringu, I can't remember, and from the original Japanese, book, which I'm not sure a lot of people actually know that this was an actual book. In fact, it's actually a series. I have not read the whole series. I've just read the first book, and it was years ago. I wasn't even 18 yet when I read it, so I don't remember every detail. But one thing that did stick out that they changed in both the Japanese movie and the American movie, which I was surprised that they changed it in the Japanese one too, was that the main protagonist, I guess you would call it, um, is actually a man in the book. There are a few changes that I could talk about. Like, they changed age and gender. The child is much younger, and Sadako, I think that's her Japanese name, which is Tamara, in the American version is much older when she ends up dying. At least that's I. I remember the film portraying her to be older, and I think she was in the book too, but I can't remember. But I most definitely know, because it was changed in both versions, both movies, American and Japanese, was that the main character was changed from a man to a woman. Bringing up the chance to talk about my favorite book, of course, and I think I'm going to spread these out a little bit instead of just clunking them all together. So I talked about in my top 10 Tuesday before, which was based around the whole series, which, if I can, I will link the playlist of my top 10 videos, just so you can watch them all. But I mentioned the whole thing. I'm pretty sure I mentioned that one because it was a favorite moment of mine in the books that really wasn't carried on to the movies, about the Mockingjay pin and where she had actually gotten it from, and how they totally cut out a character. And I thought it was a big significance, between from what the story was trying to tell and teach people and show people. They totally cut that character out, which I think was bullshit. And how she got the pin in the movie didn't really make sense because of how they live. So I noticed that if you watch the movies, they do have it in a deleted scene. I will give them that, but it's a deleted scene. They never actually explained what the hell a Mockingjay is. You learn that it becomes a symbol of rebellion and such, but you never know why. You never really, it's never really explained why this bird is so important. Like I said, they have a deleted scene in Catching Fire where it's talked about, but in the actual movie, nothing is said about it. And now looking back, when I first watched the movie, I really didn't care because I really wasn't paying attention. But after reading the books and everything, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this was never talked about. So, Mockingjay, the whole thing was a weapon the Capitol used against people to kind of carry conversations, to spy. And the people would feed them misinformation, so they released them into the wild. And so no, they weren't Mockingjays, they were what was called Jabberjays. When the Jabberjays failed and were released into the wild, they mated with female mockingbirds, creating what was called the Mockingjay. So because it was the Capitol's failure, that became like a symbol against them and everything. And that's kind of how the bird was created. And that basically is how it became a symbol of rebellion, because it was something that the Capitol tried to use against people, but it backfired on them, and now it's coming back as a symbol against them once again. Just some interesting facts. They're not red. They are silver. Plain and simple. I believe, from what I read, it was changed for the movie. But again, I really don't see the purpose of that. There's not a whole big, significance. I don't remember. This one I read years and years ago. But I found it interesting that they changed it. And I'm not sure a whole lot of people actually know that, unless they read the book. I feel like this is probably one of the things where more people have probably seen the movie than read the book. But I just find it interesting. Yeah, just a plain little fact there. Both of them sound really cool. But yeah, they weren't red. So, I've heard that the movie change kind of makes more sense because of the things that happen. But I also didn't like it in a way because I felt they tried to push romance and that kind of stuff. And you don't need romance in every movie, even if it's for a younger audience. The book became popular. People have been waiting for it to be a movie, had been waiting for it to be a movie for years. So they loved it as a book. They loved it the way it was. You didn't need kissing and romance and all that other stuff. The age change would have been fine if they didn't do that. If you went just based on the fact that maybe it made more sense because of the jobs and everything, and then moving on in life, fine. But I felt like they really tried to push it to kind of gain a certain audience. Because yeah, Jonas is 12 in the book, and he's 16 in the movie. Which I thought the actor did a good portrayal, I think, of his characteristics and his spirit and everything. But I just didn't like the other things going on in the movie. Going off from the character change of Jonas and the Giver from the movie to the book, let's just talk about the whole look of the Hunger Games trilogy. So, in the book, Katniss describes herself as olive-skinned, straight black hair, and gray eyes. While Jennifer Lawrence does a good portrayal of her. And, perhaps they didn't make the right decision. She technically is not what the book looks like, or the character in the book looks like. Not to mention, they also live in a post-apocalyptic world where she lives in the area that they are the poorest. And they starve almost all the time. There was a point where she was on the brink of complete starvation. The movie just tones down so much. And, you obviously don't want people to hurt themselves to portray movies, but with the technology they have and everything, and, it just did not feel like a dystopic world where people are suffering and everything else. It just did not look like how the book describes at all. There are actually 4 witches in the book. Again, I don't think most people know that, unless, of course, they read the book, because there's well, technically 3. One's already dead, one wants the shoes, and one helps her. But I believe it was the East and the West that are sisters or connected, and then the North and the South, which they're paired together. So basically, good, bad. And yeah, that was another thing that was completely cut out. Like, there's no mention of her in the movie at all, from what I remember. And it's kind of weird because both directions of East and West are basically mentioned. Even though one's dead, one existed, but that one pretty much never mentioned at all. The Avoxes. They're in the movie, but they're never explained what they are. Isn't until the final movie, I think it's part 2 of Mockingjay, that they basically kind of give a brief definition of what an Avox is. But we learn that the girl you see in the movie is somebody that she's met before, and then you kind of get another glimpse of how cruel their government is, that not only will they do this to the districts, but even people within their own community, if they feel betrayed or they've committed treason or whatever their version of treason, or any kind of, act against them, they basically will cut out their tongue and make them slaves. And again, like the poverty thing, a lot of things in the movie, it's an excellent movie, but very toned down. A lot of things in The Lovely Bones were toned down, and which is understandable because it's very brutal. It's both. It's hard to call it a lovely story, even though it's called The Lovely Bones. But the prose, the writing, it's beautifully written. It's heartbreaking, but it's also very gruesome in a lot of ways. It is about a child who is murdered by a neighbor. But I wouldn't say a smaller thing, but a less gruesome thing that they really don't show in the movie is a lot of the effect that it has on the family, such as the mother's affair, I believe it was with the detective, and the father's interest in the Singh woman. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. And while I don't remember the father actually having an affair, but the mother did. And that's totally cut out from what I remember in the movie. Last one, and I have to talk about it, and I'm pretty sure I brought it up before, but the whole bread thing. So, spoiler alert, not really. Because of the way the book goes and everything, it should be kind of obvious. So she makes friends with Rue, and Rue ends up getting killed. And because she befriended her and kept her safe and everything, after Rue dies, and she does her little memorial thing for her and everything, she is actually sent bread from District 11. Now the thing about it is that the reason these games exist is to pit people against each other so they will not rebel again. Basically making enemies out of people. Not to mention, people can barely afford to feed themselves, so the fact that they gave her bread that was basically supposed to go to brew or thresh, one of those two, and instead of taking it back, they had given it to her. Which is basically a big FU to their government, the capital, and everything, and a symbol of unity. And it's just briefly mentioned in Catching Fire, but I thought that scene, as small as it was in the book, was quite beautiful, and it needed more attention. Coming to what I believe is my final pick, and I'm sorry you can't see me, it's getting dark, and I don't have a light in this room, but this one is actually a manga to anime TV change, and that is the killing of Queen Beryl in Sailor Moon, and the fact that she was not killed by Sailor Moon at all. And I was kind of disappointed in Crystal, because I heard it was supposed to be more faithful to the manga, but they still changed some stuff. Like this scene here. In the manga, she is actually killed by Sailor Venus with her sword. So Sailor Venus is actually like the true commander of the Sailor Scouts after Sailor Moon. Like Sailor Moon is like the head princess and everything. But Sailor V was actually supposed to be like the true actual leader. And she's the one who actually kills the evil queen. Which is kind of cooler than the anime. Like, I love Sailor Moon and all her wands and everything. The whole sword thing was kind of, badass. And I would have liked to seen that in anime, But anyways, that is my list, guys. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.